My name is Liam, and I'm 42. For most of my adult life, I've been what you'd call the responsible one in my family. It's a title I used to wear with a kind of quiet, weary pride, I suppose. Now it just feels like a chain, one I've finally, and maybe brutally decided to break. I'm a software architect, and I like things to be logical, to make sense. My family, well, they've never made much sense. My life with my wife, Sarah, though, that's my sanctuary. That's where things are equitable, where partnership isn't a one-way street. The latest chapter in my family's saga of demands began about 6 months ago, though the stage had been set long before. I remember, maybe a year back now, my parents' basement unexpectedly flooded. A burst pipe, Dad had said, his voice all grave and urgent. It cost me $7,000 for the cleanup and the so-called emergency plumbing. A week later, a distant cousin, bless her gossipy heart, mentioned to me at a family get-together how Eleanor, my mother, was showing off a brand-new, top-of-the-line curved OLED TV. 75 inches, no less. Sarah, when I told her later, just raised an elegant eyebrow. A $7,000 television, Liam? Or a $7,000 pipe? That little comment stuck with me. It was a seed of active distrust, planted in soil already well-tilled with years of similar incidents. So, fast forward to that lovely afternoon. My sister, Chloe, all 30 years of her perpetual aspiring self, sat across from me, her latest boyfriend, Jason, holding her hand with a theatrical flourish. Chloe, tears already welling in her eyes, announced she'd been exclusively selected. Her words, for a $30,000 Global Content Creator Fellowship in Tulum. Jason, who looked like he'd be more at home selling timeshares, beamed his approval. It's a once-in-a-lifetime shot, Liam, he'd chimed in. Chloe's got raw talent. I nearly choked on my coffee. Before I could even formulate a polite refusal, my father, Richard, slid a letter across the table with an air of utmost gravity. It was apparently a final demand from a homeowners association I never knew they were part of. $20,000, it proclaimed in aggressive, bold type, for urgent community infrastructure upgrades and retroactive dues. Failure to pay within 10 days would result in a lien on their property. The letterhead looked like something run off a cheap printer. Remembering that $7,000 TV, remembering Sarah's quiet, pointed questions over the years, I felt a cold calm settle over me. I looked at Chloe's expectant face, Jason's smug grin, my father's carefully arranged mask of concern. Chloe, I said, my voice even, that fellowship sounds ambitious. But I'm afraid I can't fund it. I then picked up the HOA letter, turned it over in my hands. And this, I continued, tapping the paper, looks unusual. Very unusual. I'll need to verify this with the county records, and I think it would be prudent to have my lawyer take a look at it before any payment is even considered. The explosion was immediate, almost comical in its predictability. Chloe wailed, "You always sabotage me. You don't want me to succeed. Jason believes in me, even if my own brother doesn't." Jason puffed up his chest. "Yeah, man, some family support you are. She's a creative soul." My father huffed. "Son, this is a legal demand. It says so right here. Are you calling your father a liar or incapable of understanding a simple bill?" And then, right on cue, my mother, Eleanor, swept into the room, a hand already pressed her heart. "A lawyer? You'd involve lawyers against your own family? Against your poor, ailing mother? After all I've done for you, the sacrifices I've made, the sleepless nights I've endured." Her voice trembled with practiced outrage. She escalated, as she always did, into a full-blown performance, the matriarch wronged. Her eyes welled, her breath hitched. "If you can't trust your own family," she declared, her voice rising to a near shriek, "if you have such a cold, black heart that you deny your sister her dream and threaten us with lawyers over a simple community bill, then you are no son of mine. Get out, leave this house, and don't you dare come back until you're ready to behave like a proper, grateful son." I looked at her, truly looked at her, at the theatrical fury. I saw my father's anxious, shifting gaze, avoiding mine. I saw Chloe's practiced pout. already morphing into a look of indignation. I saw Jason's smirk, barely concealed. And in that moment, something in me didn't just snap, it solidified. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod towards Sarah, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, a silent pillar of support. She knew this scene as well as I did. "Come," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, quiet. "If that's your decision." I stood up, turned, and walked out of the house. No dramatic speech, no slammed door. Just the click of the latch behind me. In the car, Sarah reached over and took my hand. "The HOA letter is almost certainly fake," she said, her tone matter of fact. "And that fellowship is a transparent scam. You did the right thing, Liam." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 20 years. "Yeah," I said, a strange mix of adrenaline and exhaustion coursing through me. "I think I did. Now, let's see what they do when a money tap is truly off." This time, I wasn't just reacting. This time, I had a plan. The 4 months that followed were quiet. Eerily so. No calls, no texts, no dramatic voicemails. Sarah and I used the time proactively. At her suggestion, a suggestion born from her financial analyst's caution and her wifely concern, I began to meticulously gather records. Every significant bank transfer to my parents or Chloe, receipts for the cars I bought them, the home repairs I'd funded, even old emails where they detailed their never-ending financial emergencies. "Documentation is your shield, Liam," Sarah had said, her eyes serious. "And your sword if it comes to that." The folders grew thick. During those quiet months, I often found my mind drifting back to a specific day 5 years earlier. It was a bright Saturday. I'd taken Mom and Dad to the bank, then out for a celebratory lunch. We were signing the final mortgage payoff documents for their house. I had worked extra projects for 2 years to make it happen. "No more house payments, Mom, Dad," I'd announced, raising a glass of iced tea. "This place is yours, free and clear." My gift. Eleanor had wept, actual tears I thought were genuine at the time. "Oh, Liam," she'd sob, clutching my hand. "Our own home, truly ours. We're so blessed to have you." Dad had clapped me on the shoulder, his smile wide. That memory, once a source of pride, now tasted like ash. About 2 months into the silence, Eleanor began her campaign. It started subtly, accidental group texts sent to the entire extended family, lamenting my cruel abandonment and her failing health due to the terrible stress. Then came the call from Aunt Brenda, Eleanor's sister. Brenda meant well, but she was an incorrigible gossip. "Liam, dear," she'd said, her voice hushed with concern, "your mother is telling everyone you've cut her off completely, and she might lose the house because of unpaid medical bills she can't afford." She even showed me a doctor's letter. Looked a bit iffy if you ask me, saying she needs complete bed rest and a stress-free environment. A dramatic pause. But then, dear, I swear, I saw her at the mall an hour later. Looking quite spry at the Chanel counter, actually. Something isn't right with that story, Liam. She's also been very secretive about some big investment Richard is apparently handling for them. I thanked Brenda for her concern, making non-committal noises. When I hung up, Sarah just looked at me. The Chanel counter, huh? Stressful work, apparently. We both knew Eleanor's failing health was a performance she trotted out whenever she needed leverage. Exactly 4 months to the day after Eleanor had kicked me out, my phone rang. It was Dad. His voice was a caricature of panic, breathless and strained. "Liam, thank God. The bank, they're foreclosing. We got a final notice. The auction is in 10 days. They say we owe nearly $50,000 in missed payments. How could you do this to us? After you promised to always take care of the house." I let a bead of silence hang in the air. Then, feigning shock and utter confusion, I said, "Payments? What payments, Dad? I paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. We celebrated, remember? I have the certificate framed, just like the one I gave you. Are you telling me you took out another loan on the house?" My voice was carefully calibrated, concerned, bewildered, but not accusatory. "Not yet," Dad stammered. "Well, yes, a small line of credit. Just for emergencies. You know, your mother's health has been so precarious. It's all a blur. You have to fix it, son, please." A line of credit I knew nothing about. I pressed gently. On a house that was completely debt-free? How much was this small line, Dad? And whose signatures authorized it? This is serious. I'll need to see that foreclosure notice immediately. And the original line of credit agreement, plus a complete statement history for that account. I can't even begin to understand what's happened without all the documentation. I hoped, like a diligent professional trying to get to the bottom of a complex problem. Richard, caught in the trap of his own making, reluctantly agreed to send everything. The moment I hung up, my phone erupted. Vicious text from Eleanor. You cold-hearted snake. You planned this all along, didn't you? To see your sick mother homeless. Tearful, incoherent voice notes from Chloe. I'll be on the streets because of you. Jason is trying to help find a solution, but what can he possibly do against your cruelty? You've ruined my life. I calmly saved every message, every voicemail, forwarding copies to the dedicated email folder Sarah had helped me set up. Showtime, I texted her. The quiet part was over. The storm had arrived right on schedule. Richard, true to his panicked word, emailed scanned copies of the documents within the hour. The foreclosure notice was stark, citing a delinquent home equity line of credit, a HELOC. The amount due, including penalties and fees, was just shy of $50,000. But the original HELOC agreement itself was the real bombshell. It was for an astonishing $185,000, and it had been taken out almost exactly 4.5 years ago. A mere 6 months after I'd proudly announced the original mortgage was cleared, 6 months after Eleanor's tearful declaration that the house was truly ours. My signature, or what purported to be my signature, was on the agreement alongside Richard's. Sarah leaned over my shoulder, her financial analyst's eye sharp. Liam, she said softly, pointing to the screen. Look at the date on your signature page. It's different from the date on Richard's. And the notary stamp here. This notary, Agnes Periwinkle, isn't that the one Richard used for his short-lived consulting business years ago? The one who got into some minor trouble with the state licensing board for irregularities? The memory hit me with physical force. I was back in Dad's cluttered home office. It had been an incredibly stressful week for me. A critical project at work was teetering on the brink of disaster, demanding all my attention. Richard had approached me with a single sheet of paper, maybe two. Just need your signature here, son, he'd said, his tone casual, almost offhand. It's for finalizing the property tax records now that the main mortgage is discharged. Standard procedure. He'd been hovering, a pen already extended. Overwhelmed, exhausted, and yes, trusting my father to handle such a formality. I'd signed where he indicated. I never saw the preceding pages of the HELOC agreement. He had presented it as a loose end from the mortgage payoff. The deception was more elaborate, more insidious than just slipping an extra page into a stack. My first call was to the bank's fraud department. I identified myself, explained that I had paid off the primary mortgage on the property years ago, providing the payoff date and confirmation details. I then stated, very clearly, that I believe my signature on the subsequent HELOC agreement had been obtained under false pretenses or was potentially irregular, and that I was formally disputing the debt's applicability to me. The agent on the other end, initially skeptical, became more attentive as I laid out the discrepancies Sarah had noticed, including the notary's questionable history. They opened an investigation. Next, on Sarah's adamant advice, I contacted a forensic accountant she knew through her professional network. Let the numbers tell the unvarnished story, Liam, she'd said. Find out where every single cent of that $185,000 went. Then I called Richard. My voice was cold, devoid of the feigned confusion from our earlier conversation. Dad, I've spoken to the bank. They are initiating a full investigation into the HELOC, with a particular focus on the circumstances of my signature and the notary involved. If it's found to be fraudulent, or obtained under false pretenses, there will be serious legal consequences. Prison serious, potentially, for everyone involved in the deception. I'll let that sink in. I've also hired a forensic accountant. They will be tracing every dollar from that HELOC. Now, before this gets much uglier and involves law enforcement looking into forgery and fraud charges, I suggest you tell me the unvarnished truth. How Precisely. Did my signature get on that loan document for $185,000? And why was it opened in the first place? The silence on the other end was thick with terror. Finally, Richard stammered, "It was your mother. She was furious when she realized the house being paid off meant there wasn't any more large sums readily available for her. Her projects, her needs. She pressured me relentlessly. Said we had to unlock the equity you'd built, that it was rightfully ours to use, that you owed it to us for our sacrifices." He admitted to the elaborate deception with the signature page, how he'd waited until I was distracted and vulnerable. He tried to downplay it, of course. "It was just borrowing, Liam. Borrowing against the equity you already provided for us." Borrowing? I asked, my voice like ice. Or was it stealing, Dad? And tell me, whose hand actually held the pen that mimicked my name? Did Mom sign it? Or did you? I didn't expect a straight answer on that specific point, but the accusation hung heavy. Richard just whimpered. It was just we were so desperate. Eleanor can be very persuasive. Just as I hung up with him, my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Brenda, her voice low and agitated. "Liam, I have to tell you something. I feel dreadful keeping it to myself any longer. Richard came to me a few years back, terribly upset. He was asking if I knew any discreet lenders, private individuals, you know. He said Eleanor was running up huge debts with some online shopping channels and some investment schemes that sounded like pure fantasy. He was terrified of you finding out. I told him then, Liam, I told him to come clean to you, to get help. But he was too scared of Eleanor, and, I think, too ashamed to admit to you how bad things had gotten. He just kept digging the hole deeper." Her words were like pieces of a rotten puzzle clicking into place. This wasn't a recent crisis. This was a pattern, a lifestyle funded by deceit for years. And I had been the unwitting primary sponsor. While the forensic accountant began their deep dive into the Hellick, I authorized the private investigator Sarah had found a look into Chloe and Jason. Aunt Brenda's earlier comment about Chloe's seed money had been gnawing at me. It didn't take long for the PI to hit pay dirt. Chloe had received a settlement of $90,000, $90,000, from a personal injury claim nearly 2 years prior. She'd apparently taken a tumble at a high-end department store and claimed whiplash and emotional distress. The PI discovered the funds were quickly funneled through several newly opened bank accounts, with Jason making many of the withdrawals or being the co-signer on a flood of new luxury purchases. A flashy sports car, leased in Jason's name, but clearly for their joint use. Top-of-the-line electronics. Instagram posts from Jason's not-so-private account showed them on expensive weekend getaways, Chloe draped in new designer clothes, a smug grin on Jason's face. The preliminary report from the forensic accountant arrived a week later. It was, as Sarah had predicted, a cesspool of irresponsible and frankly bizarre spending from the Hellick. There were large, regular transfers directly into Eleanor's personal bank accounts. Thousands of dollars paid to QVC, Home Shopping Network, and a slew of other online luxury retailers. Significant payments to high-risk investment platforms with names like Quantum Forex Gains and Celestial Crypto Fortunes. Regular cash withdrawals from ATMs located near several out-of-state casinos Eleanor had supposedly visited on health retreats with old friends. And then there were the substantial loans to Chloe, tens of thousands, often transferred just days before Jason would show off a new expensive toy online. Almost nothing from that $185,000 Hellick had gone to legitimate household maintenance or actual emergencies. Armed with this damning evidence, Sarah and I orchestrated our confrontations. First, Chloe and Jason. We met them at a neutral coffee shop. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I calmly laid out printouts. The PI's report on the $90,000 settlement, screenshots of Jason's bragging social media posts, and a summary of the Hella transactions directly benefiting Chloe. Chloe, I began, my voice level, $90,000 of your own, which you conveniently forgot to mention to anyone. Plus, it seems, at least another 40 or 50,000 siphoned from a fraudulently obtained Hellick that your parents are now blaming me for. Where did it all go? And Jason, I turned to him, my gaze hard. How much of this windfall, this stolen money, funded your rather comfortable lifestyle these past couple of years? Jason puffed up, attempting his usual bluster. Now listen here. You have no right to pry into Chloe's private affairs. This is harassment. Sarah, who had been silent until then, leaned forward slightly. Actually, Jason, she said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. When funds are obtained through potentially fraudulent means and then knowingly received and spent by third parties, it can move beyond private affairs and into areas like accessory to fraud or conspiracy to defraud. Those are legal terms. Perhaps you're familiar with them? Jason's bravado deflated like a cheap balloon. He visibly paled and sank back in his chair. Chloe, predictably, burst into a torrent of tears, a practiced performance of victimhood. It's not fair, she wailed. Liam was never supportive of my dreams. Mom and Dad were always so stressed. I couldn't burden them. Jason just helped me manage things because I'm not good with money. Next, we went to my parents' house. Richard looked like he hadn't slept in days, pale and defeated. Eleanor, however, was primed for battle. She came out swinging the moment we stepped inside. I didn't engage with her theatrics. I simply spread the summary from the forensic accountant on their coffee table. Page after page of damning transactions. Mom, I said, my voice flat, $185,000. Gone. On shopping channels, on obvious scams, on casino trips. While you were telling me you couldn't afford basic repairs, while you were crying poverty, this is where the money was going. Eleanor snatched up a page, her eyes blazing. Lies. These are all lies. Fabricated by this so-called accountant you hired to discredit me, to make me look bad. I am a frugal woman. I've always been careful. Richard, tell him. Tell him how we've struggled, how we've sacrificed. She glared at Richard, a silent command in her eyes, fully expecting him to fall into line, to back her up, to join her in this desperate, last-ditch defense of their house of cards. Richard visibly shrank under her gaze, his eyes darting between her furious face and my unyielding one. The silence stretched, taut, and unbearable. Under the combined weight of Eleanor's furious, expectant glare and my own cold, evidence-backed stare, Richard finally, utterly, crumbled. It wasn't a sudden snap, but a slow, pathetic deflation like a punctured lung. He sank into his armchair, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of utter desolation. It's true, Eleanor, he whispered, his voice raspy, barely audible. It's all true. Eleanor looked at him as if he'd physically struck her. Richard, what are you saying? Then the words began to pour out of him, a torrent of broken sentences, confessions years in the making. He spoke of Eleanor's insatiable need for money, for material things, a hunger that had grown more ravenous with each passing year. He described her constant emotional abuse towards him if he didn't provide, her threats to ruin him, to tell everyone what a failure he was if he ever exposed her spending or her schemes. He admitted to systematically deceiving me about the Hellick, meticulously planning the moment to get my signature on that single page, because he was terrified of Eleanor's wrath and deeply, mortifyingly ashamed of his own inability to control her or their disastrous finances. He tearfully confessed to knowing about Chloe's $90,000 settlement, about Jason's blatant manipulation of her. Chloe, she cried to me, he choked out, said I'd always failed her as a father, that I was too strict when she was young, that I never understood her sensitive nature. She said this money was her one chance, and if I told you, Liam, you'd stop helping us all. I wanted her to be happy. I was too beaten down to fight anymore. He painted a picture of a man living in constant fear, always choosing the path of least resistance, a path that inevitably meant sacrificing me on the altar of their dysfunction. I listened to his entire pathetic litany without interruption. Sarah stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, a silent anchor. When Richard finally trailed off into a series of shuddering sobs, an icy silence filled the room. Eleanor was momentarily stunned into quiet, her face a mask of disbelief, not at the revelations, but at Richard's betrayal of their united front. The bank's fraud investigation is proceeding, I stated, my voice devoid of any discernible emotion. It was the voice I used at work when discussing a critical system failure. My lawyer is confident, given the circumstances of the signing, the separate signature pages, and the notary irregularities, that my name will be cleared from any liability regarding this helic. That means the entire debt, the $185,000, plus accrued interest and penalties, which is likely well over $200,000 by now, will fall squarely on you, Dad, as the co-signer and the one who facilitated this, and by extension, on this house as the collateral. I let that hang in the air. You will sell this house, I continued, my gaze sweeping from Richard's slumped form to Eleanor's thunderstruck face. Immediately, you will use every penny from the sale to pay back what you stole and defrauded. If there is anything left after the bank is satisfied, which I highly doubt, that's what you'll have to live on. Chloe will get a job, a real job, and contribute to her own upkeep, or she will find herself living on the street, perhaps with Jason if he's still inclined to stick around. I will not give you or her another dime. Ever. I took a breath. Furthermore, I added, my voice dropping to an even colder, harder tone, I have meticulously documented nearly 2 decades of financial exploitation. If you fight the sale of this house, if I find any more hidden accounts or further deceptions, I will pursue every legal avenue available to me to recoup what was taken, and I will not hesitate to ensure you both face the full legal consequences of your actions, including potential criminal charges for fraud and forgery. Eleanor let out a guttural howl then, a sound of pure, primal rage and disbelief. You wouldn't dare? I am your mother. You owe me. She actually lunged towards me, her face contorted, but Sarah stepped calmly and firmly between us, a silent, immovable barrier. Eleanor recoiled as if she'd hit a wall. Chloe, who had been listening from the doorway, her face growing paler with every word, let out a wail. My life is over. You've destroyed everything. I have nothing. Richard just sat there, head in his hands, tears streaming between his fingers, a completely broken man, the full weight of his choices, his cowardice, finally crashing down upon him. Months have passed since that day. The house was sold, a distress sale that barely covered the helic, the exorbitant interest, and the associated legal fees. As my lawyer had predicted, my name was officially cleared from the debt due to the fraudulent circumstances of its inception. Richard and Eleanor are now living in a tiny, state-subsidized apartment on the other side of town. Aunt Brenda, in her calls, paints a grim picture. The apartment is depressing, their relationship is toxic, filled with bitter recriminations. Eleanor, stripped of her ability to spend and manipulate on a grand scale, is apparently a shrew, constantly berating Richard, who has become a ghost of his former self. Chloe, predictably abandoned by Jason the moment the financial pipeline dried up, is working 2 minimum-wage jobs. She lives in a shared room in a rundown house and, according to her still public social media, spent her free time complaining about her tragic downfall and the unimaginable cruelty of her heartless brother. Aunt Brenda also reports that the extended family is divided. Some, who are likely beneficiaries of Eleanor's and Richard's helic-funded largesse in small ways, condemn me for tearing the family apart. Others, who always saw through the facade, have quietly told Brenda they think my parents and sister finally got what they deserved. As for me, Sarah and I are rebuilding our peace. The constant financial drain, the endless emotional blackmail, it's all stopped. But the scars, they remain. I'm in therapy, working through the complex grief and anger that comes with realizing the family you thought you had, or at least the one you desperately tried to hold together, was largely an illusion, a parasitic entity feeding off your sense of duty. They say blood is thicker than water. I've learned that sometimes water is what you need to cleanse a deep, infected wound, even if the blood involved is your own. I didn't just walk away that day. I systematically dismantled the rotten structure of lies and entitlement my family had built on my back. It felt brutal, And yes, some days, a sliver of guilt tries to creep in, a phantom limb of past obligation. But then Sarah will gently remind me of the alternative, a life slowly, surely, bled dry by their insatiable greed and emotional vampirism. Was there a kinder, gentler way? I've asked myself that 1,000 times. And every time, I come to the same bleak conclusion. No, they left me no other path. They had years, decades, even to choose differently. They never did. But the question still haunts me, usually in the quiet hours of the night. When your own family becomes a predator, is severing the tie an act of unforgivable cruelty, or is it the ultimate, most necessary act of self-preservation? I'm still figuring that out. What do you all think? What would you have done in my shoes?